thought it would be important for this series to cover the differences between a minus 150 freezer and a liquid nitrogen freezer. Basically, they both serve the same purpose, but they are two different types of technology. It's important to discuss them here and look at benefits and advantages. We're not going to get too much into the minus 150 freezer, but I guess it's important to understand when to offer which. So first off, the minus 150 freezer, they come in chest only, not just us, but all our competitors as well. We do them with Article, and it's basically similar to a conventional freezer. It has two compressors and refrigeration system, just like any other freezer, but it achieves minus 150. And then obviously we've been through quite a few slides already discussing what liquid nitrogen freezers are. Minus 150 freezer lowest temperature is minus 150 degrees, and this, as we discussed previously, depends if you're starting on vapor or liquid phase. If you're starting in vapor phase, your temperature could be between minus 150 and minus 196. However, there's something that I possibly didn't discuss. I said I'll touch on it later on. So, as you can imagine, some systems, not all systems are created equally. Sometimes there may be challenges within the system, and you have a temperature gradient of minus 150 to minus 196, but you could have cryo boxes that right in the center that does not get the vapor, the cooling from the vapor quite adequately enough. And there was this old sort of experiment done where one of the suppliers locked the different temperatures at different points in the rows of the racks that fit in it, and they found that actually some of the cryo boxes within the racks actually only achieve minus 120. So this is cause for concern. Liquid nitrogen freezers, the advantages of them, you ultra low temperatures, minus 196 to obviously in vapor form, you get minus 150 to minus 190. There's no reliance on compressors. So basically, it will work as long as the liquid nitrogen system's in it. Even if you don't have an autofill system, if you manually pour, it will freeze your samples. Affordability, these are generally way more affordable and modular as well compared to the minus 150 freezers. You can start from a really small vessel for a few samples, and you can expand this to really large quantities. So basically, we have it's not just affordable, but we have smaller systems for customers that they don't have that need for that many samples, and we have actually larger systems compared to the minus 150 where we take a whole lot of more samples. The advantage as well, stable temperature environment, that depends on the system and it depends on the efficiency of the system. It can offer stable temperature, but there are cases where if you don't have enough liquid nitrogen, or if you have a problem in your supply, or problem with your autofill connection, you have problems with insulation, where this actually is not true anymore. But if everything's done exactly how it should, then it could offer you an advantage of stable temperature environment. The problem though is things rarely go to plan, and this is the problem with liquid nitrogen. Still, it's the gold standard for IVF, stem cells, and biobanking. A lot of customers follow protocols and procedures that are enforced by their funders, and they are not allowed to use minus 150 freezers. So the liquid nitrogen is still the gold standard. We follow a lot of first world practices, and a lot of places they still use liquid nitrogen freezing, especially vapor phase. Disadvantages. So obviously it requires continuous liquid nitrogen supply, and I mentioned the transpirational loss of liquid nitrogen. It's extremely high. Most of our brochures have the data of if the liquid nitrogen is just standing in a vessel, how much you can lose a day. So as you can imagine, you're going to continuously have to replenish the liquid nitrogen. This can become problematic, especially if for remote areas where there's not enough liquid nitrogen suppliers. I've encountered problems with customers where the universities, especially, or the research institutes, had problems with their account with air liquid, and they had problems with their supply of liquid nitrogen. Some of them opted to build liquid nitrogen plants, and the plants malfunction after time as well. The supply of liquid nitrogen to be as heavily dependent on these systems are heavily dependent on liquid nitrogen, and the supply, if the supply in your area is really bad, then this is a real concern. In fact, it's quite common to have customers that have problem with liquid nitrogen supply. A lot of them are trying to build plants now, but they don't understand that the plants are really high maintenance. And one of the universities really spent a lot of millions on a plant that they do not use anymore, and they went back to buying liquid nitrogen from suppliers. Safety consideration, liquid nitrogen is extremely dangerous to work with. Any spillages obviously is going to cause burns, and can be also because of the high transpirational loss, you'll lose liquid nitrogen in moving it around, and basically very dangerous to work with. Potential contamination risk. So liquid nitrogen can still cause contamination. As I remember, hepatitis B can still survive within liquid nitrogen. So especially in liquid phase, this is a problem. The temperature gradient, like I discussed, we typically expect minus 150 to minus 190 degrees vapor range. But if you have, especially in the larger systems where you have a lot of samples, you may not always get the gradient between minus 150 and minus 190. Your gradient might be as warm as minus 125, which obviously causes a problem because you're not achieving glass transition state. So minus 150 freezers, plug and play, basically, only if it was that simple. But generally, you should be able to plug it to a socket and work. It has lower day-to-day operational complexity, so no filling of liquid nitrogen. No, you don't have to worry about your supply and demand of liquid nitrogen issues caused with that. No cryogenic safety risks. So obviously, there's no liquid nitrogen, so that is removed. Of that issue is removed as well. Stable temperature environment, this is dependent as well. So generally, if it works as it's supposed to work, it will provide stable temperature environment. But that comes back to a disadvantage. In my experience, liquid nitrogen freeze, or minus 150 freezes rather, it's a little bit more challenging operationally than a minus 80 freezer or a minus 40 freezer, because it goes down to really low temperatures. The gas mixtures and the compressor systems are under a lot of stress a lot of the time. Obviously, like ambient temperatures affect the performance of the freezer a lot. Stable voltage supply affects the performance of the freezer way more than it would a minus 80 or a minus 40. And in South Africa, we are prone to power failures and power outages. We're also prone to unstable voltage supply. We're prone to working in areas where air conditioners just fail and are not repaired. And these provide harsh environments. And if your customers experience any of those problems, then it's probably not a great idea to offer minus 150 freeze. Another disadvantage is less cold. So it's between minus 140 to minus 150 degrees. It's still colder than the glass transition state. So you'll still achieve what we wanted to, cryopreservation, but obviously it still poses a threat to samples, especially if the freezer is battling to maintain temperature. The first two minus 150 freezers that I ever sold gave the customer problems from day one, and it was extremely expensive to repair. After some time, the customer stopped using them, and they just basically wrote it off because the repair of the freezer cost more of the freezer itself, because of complexities of getting the gases into South Africa and ordering the compressor systems. It just never really worked the way it should. This was a long time ago, and I'm always a little bit hesitant to offer customers minus 150-degree freezers because I understand the complexities of the South African environment, especially the voltage supply and the high ambient conditions. This is obviously not such a problem in US and UK, where most of our customers have affiliations. Your customer might come and ask for a minus 150 freezer because they have a colleague in US or UK that's used one. They don't have the same issues we have. However, we have the minus 150 from Artico that has extremely powerful compressor system. It's got a true dual compressor system. It provides double security for your samples. If in the event that one of the systems fail, so these are independent cooling systems. Most freezers, we have cascade systems. I cover this in detail in the ULT training series. But with the minus 150 freezers, if one compressor fails, the other one still maintains minus 130 degrees. So with the Artico system, and I've heard as well, we haven't sold an Artico system in South Africa at this point of making the video. Hopefully sell one soon. We are much more expensive than our competitors, but it's a much more reliable system. As far as I know, no other competitor has true dual systems on minus 150 freezers, especially. This is unique to us. If you look at the freezer itself, it doesn't look like much. There's no touchscreen control. It looks a little bit bland, looks very old, but they are efficient and they work. I've had a customer that we was working with a few months ago, and they had some funders from the Netherlands that had discussions with them to replace the liquid nitrogen systems with minus 150 freezers. And their funders advised them that if they ever buy a minus 150 freezer, they should buy an Article because that's the best system in the world. And it's difficult to validate that in South Africa because we have not a lot of minus 150 customers in South Africa. But judging by the technology, I think we really have a lot to offer our customers. So if you ever get an inquiry and the customers wants to know the difference between a minus 150 freezer. In fact, a few weeks ago, a customer asked us for a minus 150 freezer code, and she says she warned us that she has been told that these freezers are pretty unstable. She asked us to explain this further. So if you ever have the opportunity to explain this with your customer, I think first understand what the resources or what your customer's lab is like. Do they have a lot of power outages? Do they have generator backup power? If they do, it's worth also considering something like a UPS to connect through this to power the time between the. So generally, if there's a power outage, it takes a while to switch from municipal electricity to the generator. And when that happens, the time sometimes the freezers they take a heavy knock because the compressors are just deprived of electricity and they try to start up again. And then when everything comes on together, there's a huge surge, everything's drawing electricity. So there's a huge problem with the delay between electric supply and generator supply. Electricity supply from municipal electricity to generator supply. UPS, we don't have to offer too many batteries, but we can offer a simple UPS with what about a probably a 5 to 20 minute battery supply to ease that conversion or the process of moving from municipal electricity to generator. But also UPS will stabilize the voltage supply, so it will protect your system. You should offer a minus 150 freezer if customers have backup generators. And then in addition, offer a UPS system. We can outsource them as well. But also make sure your customers have a room that sits below 25 degrees. The colder the room, the better, so the freezers can perform. If these conditions cannot be met, then it's best not to offer minus 150 freezer.